Well, good morning, gang. It's Kevin here, Life22, and it is Thursday morning. Um, so, as all of you can tell, if you watched the podcast last night, the interview with Vernon Robinson Jr., I did not take his advice and take a break. Um, at least not for this week. I wanted to keep it consistent. If I decide to drop down to 2 or 3 days a week for doing the daily podcast, then so be it. But I figured I'd at least keep consistent this week. So, guys, we are. I just wanted to kind of do a quick update. This ain't gonna. Hopefully, this isn't gonna be a long podcast this morning. There wasn't anything like major on the front. Um, I know the 14760 group has been busy for the last 6 hours. Um, but yeah, if you haven't seen it already, I encourage you to go online and watch to either our YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts and catch the Vernon Robinson Jr. Podcast where we interview the Ward 6 incumbent. And we kind of talk about he's an incumbent, so it's easier to have a conversation than it is like a newcomer where I have to like formulate like a whole bunch of just basic questions and get to know the person, because most of the time, if you're not an incumbent, I don't probably know who you are. Um, so so it was a lot nicer knowing having known Vernon and knowing a lot of his background and how he kind of rules on stuff, to be able to ask some of the more in-depth questions, but while still stepping back and allowing like him to kind of explain how he would handle certain topics, just so if you don't know him, you can get to know him. And that is I think that's the great expose that we're starting to show on the channel, where like you get to meet the politician, right? You get to meet the person you're voting for. You, even if you're not voting for this person, at least you can see how the council's made up or could be made up depending on who wins the election. Obviously, I don't believe Vernon is has a has competition, even though he, like me, like when I was in that position, I invited it. So. Um, but yeah, we had Vernon on the show last night. That podcast is already up. It's been up since last night, about 9 o'clock. So if you would like to go catch that, that's great. We recommend it. And then if you have, I'm trying to think. We've got we've been in contact with two of the mayoral candidates to schedule to firm up the schedule for their interviews, and then another incumbent for the alderman races. So it's we'll keep you posted as that progresses. Like I said, not a long morning. I didn't see too many major news articles in the Olean Star. I did catch one on the 14760, which I know me and Vernon touched on it last night, which was transparency in the school boards. They don't have the same transparency that your local common council has with the meetings being broadcast, especially because they don't Zoom anymore, because COVID's over, and they're all in person. But I do feel like, man, like I don't have time to go to a school board meeting. If you talk to any of the people that work at the school, the people that continue to um, that are on the school board, they'll tell you like, and that's what I keep telling other people, is that if you're on the school board, like for all the people out there who plan on running for school board, like you think that you're going to change ideology, that all comes from the state. So you're not going to do that. There are a lot of things you can do slowly, incrementally at the base level, but you're not going to change the state's like mentality when it comes to this is what a student is. Like if their goal is to do something you don't want them to do, your best bet is to pull your kids out, because you're not going to stop them. If you're trying to, I could use a talking point on all sides. Like, if you think that the district is trying to, what do they call that? Like, well, if they're trying to indoctrinate your kid in one ideology over another, like the state's already picked its ideology. Like you're not gonna change it. Like if it's secular and like they want to teach your kids not to believe in whatever religion that you're in, like they're like they don't like not like I remember when I was a kid, right? Like schools would like not talk about it, right? And prior to that, they would talk about it. They were like, "Well, we're a Christian society. You know, we were founded on Christian values, and you know, um, and it was like, oh, okay, so you know, if you weren't Christian, you just shrugged and went along with it and just understood it. And Dennis Prager actually has a long excerpt on this, like. Um, so I always recommend checking out Prager University for any of that kind of speak. You know, it's which is good stuff. But it's one of those like when I was in school, they didn't teach any of that. You know, like they didn't teach religion. They just didn't talk about it. You weren't allowed to say it. Like people still had beliefs. Like you come there, and like it now it almost seems like they have a different like the state itself has a secular religion and they are like enforcing it. Like, oh, if you come to school with your values, they almost don't like you could like pray if it's part of your religion at a certain time of day or if it's before a meal, like, you know, the state itself, like it doesn't happen in every local school district, but the state itself like does not want to see that. Like that there is a mentality that the state has that they might not like put in writing, but they kind of push. And it might not be local, you know, at our local school level, but you hear and you see documents coming out of Albany that are like pushing like an agenda. Well, you're not going to change that on the local school board. If you know, if you think that they're going to start putting litter boxes in classrooms for kids that are identifying as cats, right? Like that's the rumor that's going around. It's unfounded. And I'm not saying that it's not happening because as of like I know as of recently with the most recent presidential election a lot of the states are backing off on this issue, but as of like 2 years ago there were government officials out of Albany saying that they encouraged it. So it's like, you know, and it's like, well, they're the guys who fund us, so if we want to get funding we better take all of their encouragement, right? Like you're a young kid, you want to try to, even if you don't believe what exactly the way your parents see the world, if they're funding your college, a lot of times you just nod your head and go along. And that's kind of that same that scenario applies to a lot of the school districts, and it might not be as much in the school board members as it is like, you know, people that are making executive decisions to present things for funding to the school board, right? Like so, there's a lot of that. Like there's always an ideology, right? I want to say it was 10 years ago. I when I was getting like it was 15 years ago when I was like immersing. No, it's about 10 years ago. I was beginning to kind of make my way into the political scene locally, and I would hear about different people like that worked for, you know, electrical unions and plumbing unions and all these different unions that were across the state. And if the governor was, if you had just joined the union, you switched your party before you officially signed. If you got the acceptance over the phone and you had to come in and accept your position at the union, if the governor of the state, if you're registered Republican, the governor of the state is a Democrat, you register because there was a large push amongst it, like you will be vilified, and like that was like it never happened to me, but it was like when I like knew like 9 out of 10 people that I know that were part of the union had brought that to like, yeah, I just joined the union, I had to change my party, and I'm like, really, why? It's like because the people at the union told me I had to, or you know, they don't get funding from the state, or other union members are going to think that you're a defector, or the, you know, the governor doesn't, you know, do certain things. Like the same thing I heard happens at the school. Like if you were upper management or something like that, you had to change your party. And then when like I think that kind of fell by the wayside. I think that kind of got blown open. Somebody probably made a stink about it and kind of shed a little sunshine on that kind of situation. And I think that kind of fell by the wayside because there was a lot of people that I knew that were Republican that you start seeing change parties. And so I'm wondering if that was, you know, either a stand that they were taking or, but just to kind of throw that out there to convey the kind of mentality that like larger governments do, right? Like if you throw a stone from the shore into a lake, right? Like it's going to make a ripple, you know, and it might not have a huge effect, right? But if as you get higher in elevation, you throw that stone, the ripples are going to be bigger and grander. And that's how government works, right? Like all the power is supposed to be at the base, right? Like the local people making local decisions, and then it's like, okay, well, we do want to make murder like the the capital crime of the land, like because we hold human life over all else. So it's like we want to make murder a federal or a state thing, something that's above the local municipality, so you don't have to worry about it. It's like, yeah, why would every state have, or every municipality have to rule if murder or theft are actually crimes, right? You would just have, like, that's a blanket, like, thing, right? So then, okay, so yeah, but the problem is, by the time you get up to the highest point of government and you toss the smallest of stones, you you could pretty much displace all the water in that lake with, with the same size stone. You have to use a smaller stone because you're from a higher elevation to make small change, but it is exponential when you're at that. You make one little pen stroke at the federal level, where at the local level you might be unheard with thousands of pen strokes. At the federal level, you make one pen stroke on some arbitrary document, and it could irreparably affect millions of people. So, but if you're on the school board and you want to, or if you're going to be on the school board, you have to understand that you are not going to make the ideological changes that you want. You're not going to be able to. It's even the same thing, but not to the same degree as the Common Council. You're going to vote on rules, right? Like the state has a minimum standard. Like you can't let your grass get, I'm just throwing it out there, it might be 4 inches, but 6 inches is the standard, or 8 inches, right? If your grass gets over 8 inches or 6 inches, that's the state code, property maintenance code for grass. Well, you can have a code change that is more restrictive. You can't be less restrictive. You can't say, well, we're the pro bee state town, and we're promoting grass in residential neighborhoods to be 2 feet, because we're Tick City, USA, or whatever the reason is, or we're trying to promote bees or whatever. Well, you can't make a rule that undermines the state unless your rule existed first. So it's like that. It's one of those things. There's these overarching strokes of the larger governments that come down, and so, like, yes, even at the Common Council you're limited on what you can do, but at the state, because the state pretty much runs the Department of Ed, and I feel like the school board is literally just a way for the state to make you feel like you have some control of what they're teaching your kids, but you don't. Like, I really think it's not just, well, it exists. Yeah, well, it exists for a reason, but it doesn't exist for the reason that you think it does, because we're a fair and a fair and equitable society. It's because the state has all the power, but they want to leave you with the illusion that you have freedom and you have choice. And in regards to the Department of Education, you have none. Like, you could go to prison if you don't let your kids go to the institution. They force vaccines. Maybe you're not into vaccines, but if you have to you have to vaccinate your kids. That's it. Like, if they put down a rule, like, you could go to jail for not having your kids. And the other thing is, it's like, well, yeah, we mandated this vaccine, and if you want your kid to go to school, you have to do it. And if you don't if you just say, well, it's against my religion or whatever, what have you, and you don't send your kid to school, you go to jail for not sending your kid to school, not educating your child. So it's like, that's how they muscle you. It's the same way back in the 80s. The federal government was pushing a drinking age of 21 to just be across the board. They wanted some states didn't have them. Some states were all over the place. It's like, well, you could drink at 16, you could drink at 18, you could smoke at 18. Like, there's all these pushes. Well, and in lobby groups at federal levels, which the lobbyists are grew in strength, but the federal government would withhold, like, I remember being a kid and my dad explaining to me how big government worked, and he was like, listen, he's like, when in the 1980s, he goes, they changed it became almost, it wasn't a federal drinking age of 21, but every state had to get on board or they lost, like, like federal highway money. Like, so money that went to their highway would get exempted if they didn't meet certain criteria. And some of it was like uniform drinking ages and this and that and I remember that from like being a kid and my dad explaining that to me, and it made a lot of sense. It's like, well, why would all these other states come on board? And sometimes you do have states that like are right next to each other, right? Like when I was on the Common Council, you would have we would always look to similar sized towns that were within proximity of us, right? So like Hornell was an example. Like if were doing something and it was working, or we would look at it and be like, well, that doesn't seem to be working, so maybe we won't try that. And so sometimes you had to be a trailblazer, and sometimes you would just mimic similar states. And like we have some laws that are and Ohio and Connecticut and all these adjoining states that touch us. And then there's some laws that are completely different, but you'll find that there's going to be more similar things based on proximity than they're not. And then with the age of the internet, everybody's kind of stealing from everybody else. So just in terms of ideas, right? It's a melting pot. I said this wasn't going to be a long podcast, and then I just went on a rant about school boards and like political affiliations and corruption in state governments, but yeah, no, I definitely think that you guys because I happen to see an article from the Rag on here, and it says the teachers and parents turned out for Tuesday evening's Board of Education meeting to express discipline issues and staff levels. So it just made me think, like, I'm not going to know what's there unless I read the Rag, or if the Olean Star sends somebody and I have to read an article about it, because that's the reason there's newspapers. Because if you could be everywhere at any one time, then there wouldn't be reason for a newspaper, because you would know, because apparently you're omnipotent, and none of us are. And like, I finished, after my interview with Vernon last night, I finished listening to Tuesday night's council meeting, because I do that. It's on my agenda to listen to that, because it's local government where I live. The county needs to do the same thing. This is a shout out to the county. Like, if you are listening, because I know a lot of you do, because you know that Kevin Doherty is just down here flinging stones at county ledges. They love me. They adore me because of the scrutiny I put them under. Makes them better, right? It helps them become the wheat, then and it separates the chaff, right? So they don't like me, but one of the reasons why they were trying to make sure that they pushed me out from running for county legislature was because one of my biggest platforms, and I went door to door telling people this. I was at Right Thinkers meetings talking about it. And it was funny. I got stopped by county legislature. Well, that's not how it works, right? Well, here is what it was. I wanted transparency. I wanted to create a public record, right? Like I did with the Olean Common Council. When I was there, I would set a 360 camera. Shout out 360 Rise. I don't know if Mike Kittner's company is still in business, if he's still selling the cameras, or if he's moved on to other products now that, that's what happens. You put out a product and it's like, it might be innovative and whatever, but then some foreign company will like reverse engineer it. Next thing you know, they just mass produce your product at half the price. So, but I would use one of Mike's cameras that I had purchased from him, and I would get the 360 view, and you can find them on the channel. Not that you're inclined to go, you might want to go sample one, but you're not inclined to probably go watch old council meetings from 5 years ago, but they're on the channel, and we didn't have one. We had like the local channel 4 or whatever the PBS channel thing was, and channel 6 or 12 and we would broadcast to that, and that was it. And it was like, well, if you missed the TV channel, if you missed it, then you missed it. You weren't, there's no, like, unless you DVR'd it, which you have to have cable for that. Most people don't have cable anymore. So I do think that was, so I was a public official, so I had to make any one of those publicly available for FOIL requests and whatnot. And as a county legislator, I would have done that. I would have showed up, and they were like, well, you can't do that. There's a lot of executive sessions and blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, so I won't do it at the executive sessions. I never did on the Common Council. I understand the rules, but this public meeting is a public forum, and every part that's public about it should be expressly visible to the public, because they can't be there. a newspaper is not going to write every aspect of a meeting that you might not. They're not. They're going to put the bullet points. Even Vernon Robinson said that last night when he was talking about he makes notes and he tries to make detailed notes, but he doesn't want to add too much. So it's like, unless you're going to listen to the council meeting, you know, which I do, and I'll read his notes and I'll be like, I would have changed that. That's not how I perceive that. You're going to have some give and take on stuff like that. But if you have the raw footage and you can just show it to people, that was my biggest thing about the county legislature. And you had people that were on the county ledge that were going, nope, that's why you're not going to get in, because we won't allow it. And it's like, excuse me? Like, how much corruption is going on up here that you won't allow it? If you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to worry about. And that was always my big thing. I think that the school board needs it. I think the county needs it. I appreciate the Olean Common Council for dedicating money out of our tax dollars every month, every year, every fiscal year, taking it out of my property taxes. To show me transparency, to let me listen to those meetings that I don't have time to. I can go and listen to them at my convenience. I can wait every 6 months and just listen, just cram them out like a Netflix day if I wanted to. But it just, that's where I stand on that. But so yes, definitely need more transparency at these different offices, and then we are doing a shout out to anybody who continues to give us information, because we are, like I've been saying, one of your local great news outlets. So we people give us information, people drop stuff, maybe not so much in the hidey hole in the park, in the tree knot in the park where we grab a brown paper bag full of video evidence of things that are going on, but there are drop boxes out there that we receive footage of things, we receive recordings, we receive photos, documents, all sorts of great stuff. Or people, drop us a line, or they drop a dime, right? Is that that's the old payphone reference, to give us information that desperately needs to be out there, right? And we cover our sources, so with complete anonymity, you can kind of describe your point of view, where it comes from, and just reminding people that they can continue to have confidence in dropping sources with us, so that we can get the news out there that really needs to be shed some light on. And I know there are a bunch of things with the school district that are going on that we've become privy to. We're just looking for, we're gathering a little bit more a little bit more stuff before we provide a take on it, because we are not just a news network. We are a little bit more editorial based at the moment, where you're going to get more of the Kevin's opines from the show on different topics, but breaking it here first. So all right, guys, we'll catch you next time at Life22. See you tomorrow morning for the last show of the day. Deuces.